Every member of our team receives gifts and love from home. However, it is the donations we receive from all across the nation, from friends and strangers, which gives us the most pride in our service. For those of us serving abroad and at home, our chosen profession is truly legitimized by each person who shows support and expresses to us without saying that our mission is honorable. This is a letter from a soldier sent back to the U.S., dated August 17, 2012. I would like to invite you to come on a journey and experience a remarkable story of a young man, his caring older sister, and a city with a heart.
Joe and I went to school together. We grew up in the same neighborhood, but when we went to Mission High School, Joe and I became friends. Actually, Joe and I worked at Carl's shoe store together. At the time, they had what they called the 4-4 plan. You could work 4 hours, go to school 4 hours. Well, after school and during the weekends, we worked together at the Carl's shoe store on Mission Street. We hung out, of course, we grew up in the Mission, so the only things you did were hang out with your friends. Joe was known as a very good singer. As a matter of fact, if you talk to one of my younger sisters, she'll tell you that the girls just love Joe. He's not only a handsome man, but he was a singer. And he used to sing in the talent competitions at school. And one of the songs I remember him singing before an audience of about 600 or 800 people, whatever the school held, was Town Without Pity, which was a popular song at the time. But he was always singing. So he seemed to have that talent. I guess if he were with us today, he'd probably be a well-known singer. So I hope so anyway. After that, for some odd reason, I couldn't tell you what the rationale was, he and I had a moment of patriotism and went down to the Army recruiter and joined the Army. Of course, once Joe and I went into the service, we obviously went through basic training together at Fort Ord, and then we went through advanced infantry training, AIT, at Fort Ord. So we went into the service. We joined the Airborne was our selection. Now you would think that we would have picked something less dangerous, but that's what we picked. Joe wanted to, in his sign of patriotism, went off to jump school and completed airborne training, and then of course was assigned to Vietnam.
On December 18, 1967, while serving in Vietnam, Joe Artavia, a young man concerned about the lack of mail the members of his troop were receiving, wrote to his sister, requesting that she work towards getting his city to adopt his unit.
Dear Linda, hi there. First off, there is something I would like you to do for me. You see, back in the States, towns and cities adopt military companies over here. Now, what I was wondering is if you could talk to someone in San Mateo or San Francisco and fix it so one of them would adopt our company. You see, by having a town or city adopt us, it brings the morale of the guys up as high as the clouds.
On March 4, 1968, San Mateo adopted the Screaming Eagles A Company, ABU, of the 1st of the 327th Infantry Regiment, 101st Airborne Division. The purpose was to improve morale among the fighting troops with messages of love and support from home. San Mateo's adoption of the unit was a bold move at a time when the general public was less than supportive of the U.S. action in Vietnam. But to the men of the 327th, it meant everything. Unfortunately, Sergeant Joe never got to see the fruits of his effort. Only 20 days after the 327th 1st Brigade became the official adopted sons of San Mateo, Sergeant Joe Artavia was killed in action. Tragically, Joe, who was just 19, was killed in a firefight trying to aid a fallen trooper.
March of 1968 turned out to be a particularly tough month for the unit. When I say unit, I mean the company and the battalion and the brigade as well. Probably as tough as a month as the unit had in the entire term of the war. We started off in early March with 140 men approximately. In the end of the month, there were 50-something men left in the unit. So we had about 60% casualties in that month. The action where Sergeant Artavia lost his life, again that month of March, every day something happened. A firefighter getting mortared, sometimes 2 engagements in one day. The previous day, there were 2 or 3 separate firefights, frankly, as well as getting strafed by our own air support. We had been locked in engagement with an enemy company for about 3 days, and this was our final assault on the 24th, and it occurred around noon. Sergeant Artavia was part of our point element, and he was in the process of helping a fallen comrade. He was killed around noon on March 24th.
A military car drove up to tell me that Joe had been killed in action. That was a difficult period for me to realize that I had just come from a women's group that had just packed packages for Joe and his group and told me that this one was for Joe, and I came to hear that. So kind of set me back for a period until the reporter from the Times, Vera Graham, called me in to get Joe's picture that was in the paper, first adopted son killed in action. She sat me down to tell me that this is what your brother would want, Linda. And from that point on, I took an about face. And when I mean about face, I went out to the community and talked to schools and kids. And the support from just everyone, our civic leaders, we started sending packages and care packages and everything.
When we started getting letters and packages from citizens in San Mateo, really the letters were more important. They were just more personal. Also, a lot of the care packages that came in were too big to be sent out in the field. For the men, it brought them home.
In 1968, out of 365 days, the 101st Brigade spent 355 days in the jungles of Vietnam, exposed to the dangers of combat, with only 10 days of stand down in the rear area. Due to their unprotected conditions, this tough, courageous, and dedicated unit suffered a brutally high mortality rate. Many brave soldiers were wounded on multiple occasions, causing an astounding casualty rate of over 150%.
Well, when we heard of the adoption, fortunately we were kind of between things. We had been working in the lowland area, and the forward rear base camp, Camp Eagle, was just starting to be built, and we were there for one night, one day, before we went up in the mountains. And so there was almost like a mini stand down for one day, and the word quickly spread about the adoption. And this is actually late February. So probably everybody was optimistic about the adoption itself. And all kinds of rumors. One of the rumors was that when the men came home, they would have a date with a Playboy bunny. That was one of the rumors circulating. Yeah. So it was excitement, and it was short-lived as far as staying at Camp Eagle. It was just one day and one night, and then we set off for our mission at that point. It's unusual for a platoon leader to still be out on line duty with only 3 weeks to go in Vietnam, but one of the other platoon leaders had gotten malaria, so they asked me, called me if I'd come out, and I said sure. So I was back in the field again, and I think on the 10th day, I remember sitting in the bottom of a bomb crater, and I got a call from the rear area that you were coming in, and I had to catch a chopper back to Camp Eagle to get cleaned up and pick you up 2 days later in Saigon.
I looked out the window of the plane and I saw an eagle insignia on a soldier. And I said, thank God, he got my telegram. As I'm walking down the stairs from the plane, I noticed this very young, handsome lieutenant coming up. He introduced himself as, I'm Lieutenant Patterson, and you must be Linda. And I said, yes, I am. He says, well, I'm here to take you to Camp Eagle, and I can tell you that the men are very excited about your trip and meeting you. He introduced me to a lot of the soldiers that were in the rear area, and I would talk to the soldiers at night on the radio, and I would have a code name, and just as they were hacking their way through the jungle to get to me, it would take them a few days. But in between that time, you had me on fire bases, you had me serving lunch, and then you took me to hospitals where we met MASH units, which were the hospitals, and where I would talk to our wounded soldiers.
As you know, the city of San Mateo, with you carrying the city seal on those nickel-plated medallions, you brought those with you and greeting cards, and those would go to the men, personalized, all the men that had their name on the back of the medallions. And you may not realize this, but the company only spent 9 days in the rear area the whole year I was there in 1968. So really, because of you, with the 2 or 3 days that they came in because of you, that accounted for 1/3 of the time that they weren't in that jungle for the whole year.
I remember the anxiety that was building up inside of me when you told me that Joe's unit was coming in, and they were going to be there in a matter of minutes. In fact, you came in and said, they're here, and you can come out from the little hooch you kept me in. But meanwhile, it was like my heart was pounding, and I was very nervous, but I was also reflecting back to really seeing my brother visually in my memory. And now I was going to be walking out there with the men that served with him, with the men that were with Joe his last moments. So when I walked out there and faced him, I couldn't get over how young they all looked. They were like 19, 20-year-old kids. As I called their name up, and they gave them the Christmas card from the mayor and the city, and then the medallion, they all had smiles and thanked me. And I felt, for the first time, very close to them, as if I was the oldest sister, like I was with my brother, for all of them. So that was a real moment in my life when I felt a change. When the soldiers around me started talking about him, Lieutenant Patterson, he came back out in the field when most platoon leaders didn't have to, especially after he was wounded. He went back out there, and they highly respected him. And I started this admiration for the man that was escorting me around, started building up in me, and I just thought, wow, these guys really, think a lot of their platoon leader. As we were talking, I remember him saying, you're 1 in a million, Linda, like that, made me feel really good. When it came time for me to leave, and we went all the way down to Saigon, all of a sudden, rains, but not regular rains, monsoons just poured down on us, and we jumped out and went and tried to huddle in some cover, and all of a sudden there was a restaurant right there, a little French cafe. So we dodged into there, and we looked at each other and said, gee, we're the only 2 people in here. And so we sat down, and they were playing music from Moulin Rouge or something.
Theme from Moulin Rouge.
Yeah, and it was like something out of Casablanca. Something had clicked, And as we said goodbye, you asked me what's wrong, and I said, I just have a tough time leaving you. But you said, I'm going to come by and see you. And I said, yeah, okay.
I was privileged to be the commander of A Company and lead you guys through the city of San Mateo. I'll be honest, when we were over at Oakland and trying to march, I was scared to death because it was like we all had two left feet. But as soon as we took off, I don't know, something clicked, and you guys performed miracles.
Well, when we got back, we were very impressed that the people of San Mateo, Linda and Steve, all the people who assisted them, had done what they had done starting back in '68. It was the only place we'd ever heard of in America who supported the troops regardless of how they felt about what was going on politically. We have wonderful memories marching down through San Mateo itself, turning into the park, having the opportunity to give away as much gear as we possibly could without having to get an Article 15 for it was wonderful. And those of us who still talk every now and then will never forget how warmly we were greeted, how much respect we were given, and what an honor it was for us to represent everybody we did to the people of San Mateo.
Mm-hmm. I agree 100%. It was far different than when I returned from my first tour.
What the people of San Mateo did for us, I think, so far exceeded our expectations. 40 years later, it seems to me like it was yesterday. We were marching down those streets and in the park and eating hot dogs and having kids on our shoulders and just having a great time.
Mm-hmm. And you think back at that time, as you've mentioned, that to my knowledge, we're the only unit to come back from Vietnam and receive the reception that we did. That makes a huge impression on how you feel about what we did, and especially, as you have alluded to, the gratitude that we felt toward the city of San Mateo, its leadership, Linda, everyone. It just gives you goose pimples sometimes.
Well, I think the impact of what the experience of the 4 years from 1968 to 1972 had on me personally had an impact on me wanting to do more in terms of forming America Supporting Americans, which is a nonprofit to support our troops. And this was brought about from our entering a war again with Desert Storm, the first Gulf War. And that's where you came into leading it in the city, in San Mateo, and following pretty much in the footsteps that I had in carrying that mission for those guys. It was September 11th that America Supporting Americans, Norma, as you know, really took off to expanding the adoption and the experience that I had by getting other cities and towns to do what San Mateo has for our troops.
I was overwhelmed by the story, the specialness of it. And Desert Storm was my first introduction to this program and the adoption of Alpha Company. It was just a matter of connecting the community with the soldiers, and everyone was so willing to help.
101st Airborne Division Air Assault is home-based at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. I know you've made many trips out there and have gotten very close to the families. The wives are very supportive and extremely grateful to you, Norma. But I know the soldiers look upon you as a special angel.
So Conrad, do you remember when we first got started with ASA? This was about 4 years ago, and my college coach, Sid Jameson, came in. We had an opportunity to have breakfast, and he had a couple of brochures regarding ASA. When Sid had explained what ASA was all about, just really seemed to make sense for me as a coach. Do you recall that first year when we connected with the 10th Mountain Sustainment Unit?
Yeah, when we first started doing it, everyone was like, why are we doing this? And this is a waste of our time. But then once we actually learned like where it was going, everyone seemed to join together and understand that it's going to be going to someone who then would open it up and be happy receiving this.
Yeah, and in fact, when we brought all the players together that first year, we were over at our office. And I remember you guys sitting there, a bunch of you guys came in with McDonald's and you were kind of eating, and yeah, the attitude was, why are we doing this? And this isn't cool, and I can't believe we got to come in and do this. And I'd say probably within about 10, 15 minutes, I mean, you guys are just really engaged in writing the letters of support. It was really heartfelt from my standpoint just to be able to look out as a coach and really see you guys engaged. I just thought it was really cool because I'd not seen you guys as 5th and 6th graders really, focused on others. What I saw was just how it impacted our team and our program, because not only were we really helping those that are serving our nation and away from their families, but it really united us that first year. You remember the logos that we had on the back of our helmets?
Yeah, and then we would touch it if we made a mistake on the side.
Yeah, and again, I think that was kind of a really cool thing that you guys came up with, just that whole concept of if you're going to make mistakes, it's okay to make a mistake. We just want to be able to respond.
We sang a tree. I wasn't actually there, which I would have loved to have been, but saying the tree was cool, knowing that they could both up the ornaments and then they took a picture and sent it back to us. I wish I could someday meet the person that I sent that tree to.
Really, for me, again, as a coach, just watching you guys engaged in that whole effort of focused on others, helping our troops, and understanding that you weren't looking for anything in return.
Linda, one of the things that I'd like to ask you is, I know that you've been recognized for the work that you've done, but you just recently, I think it might have been last night, received a special recognition.
It was given to me by the Chief of Staff of the Army, and there was a ceremony, and I was given an extremely high honor to be able to meet and have dinner with the Chief of Staff, General Odierno, and they presented me with this, what they call the Twilight Tattoo, is the ceremony. Mm-hmm. The General had made some announcements, and before a large committee in Washington and Virginia, that ASA and what ASA represented to his soldiers, and made the difference that he felt merited this award. That's why ASA may have received this, but it really recognizes all of you.
Well, it all started back in 2004, as you know, when you contacted the city of Burlingame. We weren't aware of what America Supporting Americans were. We got involved, we had a couple of meetings, and people from the community came in, said they were interested in it, but they didn't know what it was and wanted to know what we could do. And right away after conversations with you, I realized it's really up to us. It's the message from the city of Burlingame and the community to the soldiers. We were able to get the city council right here in Burlingame to formally adopt by resolution Bravo Company. And that was in May of 2004, after you had approached us. They had already returned from the initial invasion into Iraq when we were in conflict with Saddam Hussein. 2004, we brought some soldiers out. We paid for them, we put them up here so that we gave them a taste of California and the hospitality. They carried that message back. They went to a deployment, and that's when the community really came together and donated personal items, snack items, books, magazines, those types of things that we would ship to the soldiers. And every once in a while, we'd receive a reply or a notification back.
You have actually shown the bond that was created by your community citizens and your soldiers. You've made your soldiers feel like they're part of this community, becoming a family, and this is what these soldiers really appreciate.
I found right away that we were, in essence, a vehicle for people to reach out to the soldiers. A lot of people wanted to, they just didn't know how. I feel that it was an opportunity in life that I wouldn't have had before. I have close friendships with soldiers back from 2004 that we still keep in touch. One of my best friends was one of our original soldiers that we brought out here in 2004. Soon after that, he left Bravo Company, remained in the 101st, and he deployed back to Iraq. So we stayed in touch. Then his next deployment was to Afghanistan, and he was severely wounded in Afghanistan. And I remember receiving a phone call from him telling me that his deployment had been cut short and that he was now in Texas. And my heart kind of jumped in my throat when I heard this. And when he got well enough to get out of the hospital, he drove across the country. He has family in San Diego. He went to San Diego, visited his family, and he drove up here to see me. And to me, it was just this incredible experience. He and I went out to dinner here in Burlingame one night, the first night that he arrived, and we were chatting it up and everything else. Well, the next night, I had arranged for Burlingame Adopt Unit Committee people through ASA to meet him at one of my fire stations. And there was probably 30 or 40 people that came to meet him. And I got called out of the room for a phone call before I could introduce him the way I wanted to. I come back in the room, and his name is Pablo. Pablo was standing there in front of this group of strangers telling what his deployment had been like, but what it meant to get a box from Burlingame and to have that relationship. He must have talked for 45 minutes. The people were just in awe of this guy who after all of that would drive across the country to say thank you. I mentioned to Pablo that the waiter had asked me if he and I were friends, and I said, yes, we were. And I said, I realized what I should have said was we're more like brothers than friends. Yes. And that's where we are. There's an age difference, there's a generational difference, but we are like brothers to this day.
In 2007, the town of Hillsboro participated in the Adopt a Unit program, and our unit is H&H Company, which stands for Headquarters and Headquarters Company. And ever since then, we've been participating in it yearly and throughout their deployments. In 2007, after we had the adoption, the residents really came together, and it was a real clear indication that there was a lot of support, obviously, for our troops, but what was unique about it is it gave a chance for our residents to come together as a community and to participate in the program. So we had people from every different political background and every different belief background all lending their support, coming to our station, and working with our officers and the families of our officers to lend their support and send off these packages that we send. So throughout the Adopt a Troop period, there's a long time where we're always receiving supplies and gifts from people that are coming in and helping out within the community. And then there's that day when we package all these things up and send them off. It's always a big day for us. We have lots of people, volunteers from both the community, all aspects of our town employees, and our town police department. And in this time period, we're packaging all these boxes up with all the different supplies we have. And one item we add in there is many cards that are handwritten, both from our community, our families here in town, but mostly from our school children that go to schools here in our district. And each one of these packages gets a handwritten card from them. It was a unique experience recently to meet up with some of the troops who've actually received some of these packages. And while they were very grateful to receive a small bit of comfort we could send them in some of the supplies that came over, the thing that stuck with them most is the handwritten cards and the sentiments and the feelings that came along with them. And this seemed to be the primary thing that they held closest to them and that they kept with them throughout their deployment. And it was really telling for me at that point to hear them and to really understand that that's what meant the most to them. And it was a very close moment, a very proud moment for me here.
just wanted to say, for me, what a great honor to welcome all of you here today. I mean, it's an honor for our whole city, but back in 1968, when the city of San Mateo adopted the Screaming Eagles, I was in 8th grade at St. Gregory's. I was our student body president and brought forward the opportunity or the idea for us to do a writing campaign to all the soldiers, and so all of our school got very involved, and I think we're one of the few, or maybe the first, school to really step up and write to all the soldiers. So for me to be able to be here tonight as a city council person now representing the city and to welcome all of you back again is just like a dream come true. So I'm just very excited. I want to thank all of you for your service, for your patriotism, for your bravery, and for being there for all of us. Thank you.
My name's Niall Brown. I served in Vietnam in 1968. Came in country in January, and shortly after I was assigned to A Company, ABU as we call it, First 327 of the 101st. We were adopted by the city of San Mateo, and it was, you know, something that didn't really register to me at that time because we were in the middle of the Tet Offensive, and I wasn't sure what was going on. And then I was wounded in March, and letters from San Mateo. She was one of the students that had written letters. Oh, excuse me, Maureen. Yeah, and it was, you know, it gave me a chance to say thank you, because the letters when I was in the hospital, getting back together to go back to the war, it meant a whole lot. And so I suddenly understood how important it was for the adoption.
Sag in the middle. Down. Up. When I say down, you say need more. When I say up, you say discipline. Down. Need more. Up. Discipline. Down. Need more. Up. Discipline.
They will lift each other off the ground. Down. Up. Down. Ready? Up. Up. Oh, good job. Good. Up. Up. Up.
I got the best. Up. Look at that form. Look at that technique. That's what I'm saying. Go, 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 go. Look, she failed. She failed. Come on, go. And she got up with that form. That's what I'm talking about.
I thought it was really interesting learning about the history of all of this. I didn't know about it until today, and it's really cool to take part in this tradition that they have every year now, paying tribute to what they did in 1968 for the troops, and it just means a lot, especially to meet people in the Army now. It makes it a lot more personal when you actually get to meet them. It's different than seeing things on TV, and so it means a lot that we were able to help and support.
We acknowledge a remarkable 44-year relationship between us and do hereby proclaim our intent to honor this unit in perpetuity. Honored First. Thank you. Linda, why don't you come up here for just a second. So we have for you a necklace of a heart. And I would like to say that this is for the caring, the love, and the single-minded devotion that you have had to a brother, to a country, a brigade, and to a husband. Thanks very, very much.
I would like to really start not by giving some comments, but like to bring some people forward and recognizing them for their hard work and support of our great brigade. So if I could first have come up Patrice Olds, Joan Diskin, Don Dornell, and Leanne Thornton. We've got a small token of appreciation. In World War II, as the brigade was forming up, we wanted to have a distinctive insignia that we put on the side of our helmet. And every brigade within the 101st adopted a distinctive sign. And ours is the club like from a deck of cards. And so we're presenting them as a pressed metal club that we've written some notes on in appreciation for their work, and hopefully you can find a place in your home or office where you can hang this. Okay, I think we all know that the world of literature has the Three Musketeers, the world of music has the Three Tenors, and the peninsula is blessed with the Three Mayors. So if I get the Three Mayors to please come up to the stage here. So for each we bring from Fort Campbell a framed print from our last combat deployment to Afghanistan. It's entitled The Battle of the Valleys, and it shows brigade soldiers in action in Afghanistan. And that's our destination, as Steve mentioned here in just a little bit. But I'd like you to find a place in your respective city halls where you can sign up. But it's really our way of saying thank you for the great support that we've received from you. So for each of you.
Many years ago, I passed the torch carrying freedom onto others, and I passed it on to you guys. And what you've done with that torch is simply amazing. You've done that, you're very heroic, and your passion, coupled with your selflessness, is to be honored. And I wish that what we're doing tonight had been done for many, many years. I know back in the Vietnam era it was not done very much. It was not done for you guys also, and I think that's one thing that's going to start changing in the next tonight and for a little bit of time on. So to every Screaming Eagle, I'm extremely proud of your efforts in Afghanistan and Iraq, and in order to resume their rightful place in a peaceful nation instead of what they've got now. Thank you to all of you for making this, helping keep this the greatest nation on the face of the earth. Thank you very much.
The mission, for those of you who may not totally be familiar with it, of an adopted unit partnership is to support and lift the spirits of our military while they are deployed, to let them know that they are remembered by those back home. What you may not know is that the adoption of your unit has been instrumental in uniting our community on many levels. School children, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, companies, seniors, employees, families, and friends have all expressed their heartfelt thoughts through the words that cross 8,000 miles to reach a soldier so far away from home. During the deployment, company commanders are contacted and asked what is needed, and we do our best to make it happen. One of the unusual requests we got was for stuffed animals. We weren't quite sure why, but we just followed orders. And it turns out that being deployed in Iraq and Afghanistan, and when a soldier routinely comes up or comes across a child, they like to offer him something to start to build a bond. And what they had to offer were office supplies, like pens and paper. And kids really love pens and paper. They make a lot of friends. But with the arrival of the stuffed animals, the soldiers were able to build this bond with the children, who then helped them locate burial points of IEDs, which they had seen being planted by the enemy. So who would have thought that a stuffed animal would have served such a useful purpose and perhaps saved a life?
I'd like to talk about the Bastogne Brigade, where we are and where we're going. Currently, we're in the middle of our training program in preparation for what we believe will be deployment to Eastern Afghanistan at the end of the year, after about 18 months' time at home to refit and retrain. We believe we will deploy to Eastern Afghanistan again, but the difference is that we expect to deploy with only about half of the brigade, somewhere around 2,000 soldiers, with our main focus being the training of Afghan security forces so they can handle security responsibilities as we draw down U.S. forces in Afghanistan. We will still be required to fight at times, but now the most important mission will be the training of our Afghan partners in the Army, local police, and border police to defend their own country and run it themselves. I recently spoke with the brigade commander in Afghanistan, whose unit we will replace, and he talked about how we are teaching Afghans how to conduct and run operations using very basic tools, unlike the modern, state-of-the-art, high-tech tools we use in the U.S. Army. We've made, I believe, a wise choice not to overburden the Afghans with technology they do not need and cannot maintain, and instead are teaching them the skills that they can use and sustain on their own. And this is the final point that I'll make about the brigade. It's manned with great young Americans who have joined the Army in the hopes of making a difference. I am confident that whatever mission we are given, the Bastogne Brigade, this great team of professional soldiers, will perform exceptionally well, mindful of the rich and proud legacy we've been handed, and eager to improve upon it. And in the end, we know that when we deploy, we will not deploy alone. That the love of our families, both of our blood and of choice, our adopted communities, will be there to strengthen us and support us as we face the challenges of Afghanistan. Thank you very much.
My last comments tonight are to the men of the 101st Airborne Air Assault. As I review my career, my proudest moments were when I commanded a company in combat. That was my war. We won it in my unit. As you prepare to go back to Afghanistan, I want you to know the legacy of the 101st goes with you, and you must continue to make us proud. This is your time, this is your race, and we will pray for your success. Amen. Thank you.
I have been fortunate enough to go to a couple of ABU reunions, specifically with the guys from 66, 67, 68, and a couple of them who were grievously wounded in places like the Yashore Valley and bad neighborhoods like that, were recovering in the 95th EVAC and the 85th EVAC, and did receive cards and letters and care packages from the people of San Mateo. And in a couple of particular cases, that made the difference in helping them to regain the will to survive and get up and return to some level of normalcy. And that, I think, is a tribute to the entire program that Linda started, which has since become ASA. But like I said, I personally know people who have publicly expressed that, you know, if they didn't get those letters while they were in hospital, they don't know what would have happened.
Our nation will never be defeated when we, citizens and soldiers, stand together. Thank you for being intelligent enough to understand that the active duty soldiers that are here today that are preparing to go to war are Americans who deserve your support. You citizens of San Mateo, Burlingame, Hillsboro, you can make a difference in a soldier's life. Please continue.
And follow me. Pick up your weapon and follow me. Airborne infantry. Airborne infantry.